This is my testimony. This last February, I was baptized here at Cornerstone Church. This was a commitment to God initiated by my boyfriend who had yet to be baptized. I, however, was being baptized for the second time. Following this baptism service, Pastor Steve said that my testimony was proof of never giving up praying for that loved one who was not yet a believer. This statement replays in my head daily as I pray for my own daughter and continues to deepen my reflective understanding of God's constant pursuit of an intimate relationship, even when we refuse to acknowledge his presence. Pastor Steve also called me a liberal feminist, which I forgive him for. It hurt to hear it, but it was the truth. For more than a decade of my life, I was trapped in an anti-Christian feminist worldview, where I championed many of the worldly sins the enemy has shaped, in versions of God's carefully crafted, beautifully intricate, complex, and miraculous natural order. I was essentially pro everything but God, specifically what I deemed as Western patriarchal religions. But I obviously did not begin life in this mindset. Rather, the enemy, who always seeks to lie, cheat, and destroy, used a very tragic event in my life as fuel to fester his filter of lies over the eyes of my heart. My first baptism occurred when I was a young wife with a baby. My ex-husband was a very broken man. He used God and the church to excuse his physical and verbal abuse, to coerce me to stay, and overall, to dominate me. When he was in God mode, he would throw out my books, music, and even my clothes if they did not align with his legalistic extremes. When he was in this mindset, he would say, "You cannot be lukewarm for God." Well, yes, this is true. I now see that his actions were purely superficial and exterior to distract from the real restoration that was needed, his heart. His God mode rarely lasted and was always followed by bouts of addiction, abuse, and dominating demands that I engaged in those behaviors alongside him. After 5 years, I had enough. I confessed the extent of his sickness to my family and his. While my family met me with support and urged me to leave, his mother, a minister, told me I needed to lay down my life and follow my husband. There was no empathy or compassion for what I had endured, only judgment for my decision to leave. Looking back, I realized this interaction was monumental. It didn't just turn me away from the church. It was the birthplace of what would become my false identity. In C.S. Lewis's The Screwtape Letters, two demons correspond back and forth about the souls they are preying upon. The dark weaknesses they find to tug at are like the threads of veils that cover the eyes of our hearts and take us further from our Father. At this very painful time in my life, when at such a young age, I could not possibly process the pain and betrayal alone. I needed God, but instead I turned to the world. This was my thread. This is where I imagined the enemy said, "I've got her." Following my divorce, I sought healing in all the wrong places, ironically turning to more dominating men. Spiritually, I sought out New Age beliefs, pagan practices, the occult. Essentially, all of my spirituality was hollow and centered around the self rather than the Creator. This yielded equally hollow results that sent me from one man to another, one belief to another. But because I danced from childhood through college, taught and danced professionally, I mistakenly believed that my art was my therapy. But 14 years later, when I became pregnant with my second child by a man who was eerily similar to my ex-husband, I saw how little I had actually healed. And yet, once again, instead of turning to the only man who could truly heal me, I turned to the external world, permitting the enemy to pull more and more threads woven from the darkness in my heart. In grad school for dance in 2019, after the birth of my son, I gripped my anti-Christian worldview with a ferocity. My once casual New Age beliefs became doctrine, with the pagan goddess and the concept of the divine feminine as my idol. I wrote and staged dance works that explicitly blamed Christian beliefs for my trauma. I mocked Christianity as a patriarchal hijacking of the early mythologies. I was so caught up in my false identity that I was that person that took the time to fight online over my disbelief in God. And every time I visited my family, we fought as I advocated for and defending every worldly belief that they opposed. One of my greatest regrets is that I directed this anger at my beautiful sister. She had recently confessed an encounter with Jesus that moved her from a secular life to one of total devotion. Instead of celebrating her, I argued that her new beliefs shouldn't interfere with respecting my daughter's preferred pronouns. And when she told me that she was praying for me, I was offended. I was so completely blinded by the worldly wisdom that the enemy crafts. In 2022, despite all my feminist wisdom, I hit rock bottom. The dance teaching job I held in Oregon for 10 years was gone due to COVID. My car broke down. I couldn't pay rent. I was constantly fighting with my family. Yet something inside me said, go home. Now I know it was my Father calling me back. I didn't have an ounce of the faith my sister had. I was 40, an entirely single mother of 2, and I had absolutely nothing. My only desire was to belong to my family again. I accepted their invitation to a nighttime service with Pastor Dr. Wong at Cornerstone. I vividly remember when the pastor called people to the altar. All resistance left my body. I went down. I surrendered all the hurt and anger I had carried for years. I wept at the altar and I felt God's embrace. And while I knew so little at that time about what a relationship with God meant, let alone looked like, I knew with every inch of my being that I was finally home. I got a tissue. That was over 3 years ago. Since then, God has transformed my life internally and externally. I got a full-time job as a dance teacher at a nearby high school where I get to teach my passion and counsel students in need, many of whom are believers. We have a house of our own now, not an apartment. It may seem trivial, but having our own space where no one complains that my son is too loud means everything. That was over 3 years, Once the job and house were in place, I prayed for a partner, a good man. Then I met Maxim. Ironically, my dad had tried to set us up a year prior, but we weren't ready. God ordained the perfect time for us to meet. Maxim has become the father my children never had. And walking in faith together is a true blessing. We cherish our family here at Cornerstone. Internally, the change has been the greatest. Daily, God opens the eyes of my heart. The worldly beliefs I once defended have fallen away like paper-thin lies of the enemy. In their place, he continues to reveal a wisdom that transcends anything temporal. When I read my testimony at my baptism, I ended with how, when I confessed my ex-husband's abuses all those years ago, what I wish my mother-in-law would have said was, lay down your life and follow Jesus. But as I wrote this testimony, I couldn't help but reflect on God's timing and how I needed to live through what I did. I needed to stumble through the shadowy valleys, to fall down again, to get lost in the dark so many times that when I finally surrendered, I was truly ready to see that God was there waiting all along. All that I had to do was reach out my heart to him and let him lead me into the light. I mentioned C.S. Lewis earlier. As an avid young reader, he was my favorite author, even though I wasn't a believer and I had no idea the layers to his stories. The Chronicles of Narnia was one of my favorite series. I absolutely loved one story in particular, The Horse and His Boy. In this story, the main character, Shasta, is traveling on his horse in the dark of the night with Aslan, invisible, walking beside him. At first, Shasta is scared and tries to deny that anyone is there, but eventually he asks, who is there? Aslan says, one who has waited long for you to speak. The story continues with Aslan prompting Shasta to tell him his sorrows. This is followed by Shasta revealing all the lions that chased him to this destination, to which Aslan replies, "There was only one lion." And this still gets me. "I was the lion." Aslan then recounts all the ways in which he was there alongside Shasta through it all, divinely intervening so that Shasta could reach the southern kingdom of Narnia and find his true identity. Coming back to Pastor Steve's statement that my testimony is proof of the power of prayer, I can't help but reflect on the many memories of how God used people to intervene in my life, how he so carefully placed them throughout my shadowy travels like breadcrumbs. My ballet teacher and her husband, both of whom are devoted Christians, and always took the time to compassionately answer my questions of doubt. My sister, as mentioned earlier, who quietly sat by me countless times while I babbled on about pagan mythologies, atheist beliefs, and worldly views, never arguing with me, always praying for me. My mother, who after returning to her childhood faith did not sit silent, because her and I are not the silent types. My friend from grad school, a believer who would listen to my views for hours over the phone and then respond by reading me a Bible verse and eventually sending me a woman's Bible. Neighbors, strangers, you church, breadcrumbs, God's many lions, all divinely intervening to bring someone as lost as I was out of the shadowy valley, out of a false identity. Upon entering the kingdom of Narnia, Shasta discovers that he was kidnapped as a youth and is the heir to the kingdom, a prince. My false identity was akin to a kidnapping, one orchestrated by the enemy, a spiritual kidnapping away from the inheritance of the kingdom we are all promised through Christ. But like Shasta, I was guided home. Thank you, God.
And my soul sings anymore.